Welcome to the Coffee House, where in the next hour, nonprofit Blue Cross has big plans to go for-profit, a plus for consumers and investors, or just another Wall Street fad. Maryland Attorney General Joe Curran takes a close look. Maverick wordsmith Sam Smith asks, "Why bother?" which just happens to be the title of Sam's latest book. Plus, the weekend traveler visits Glen and takes us salsa dancing. Carla Perlow drops by to talk shop with Liz Lerman and show us some recent works performed at Dance Place. We've got a Rebecca Villarreal poem, and filmmakers Louis Alvarez and Andy Kolker chat about their PBS documentary, People Like Us, Social Class in America. Welcome to the forum at the Coffee House. CareFirst no longer wants to be Blue Cross of D.C., Maryland, and Delaware. So, CareFirst is planning to convert itself from a nonprofit entity to a private insurer and then sell itself off to a California insurance company, WellPoint, which itself was once a nonprofit Blue. CareFirst has been preening itself for sale by pruning its poorer performing products like the Free State HMO, which used to serve individual and small group policyholders. Conversion is a big deal, says health policy analyst Schramm, even if few people are paying attention just now.
Down at breakfast, on the one hand, they don't want to hear about health insurance ownership and arcane subjects like that, but they appreciate, on the other hand, that when a nonprofit company becomes a for-profit company, it's going to be harder for their doctor to get paid. There'll be more co-deductibles or co-insurance for them to pay, because the game here is for the new owners or for the for-profit conversion to pay fewer dollars back to the community so they can entice investors with dividends.
Schramm calls CareFirst's offer to pay $1.3 billion into a foundation to provide coverage for the uninsured a decoy. He maintains that the income from such a fund wouldn't come close to offsetting the costs of insuring the uninsured. The WellPoint deal must first be approved by regulators in D.C., Maryland, and Delaware, where CareFirst insures some 3.1 million people. CareFirst has some significant backing, including Maryland Senate Finance Committee Chairman Thomas Bromwell, a Baltimore County Democrat. CareFirst maintains that conversion to for-profit status will benefit consumers by giving a successor company easier access to capital markets, which CareFirst asserts is necessary to be competitive with rival for-profit insurers. According to a study by Schramm, former president of the private health insurance industry lobby, for-profit conversion has been a financial boon in Virginia and California for the new owners of the former Blues.
To look at Trigon or to look at WellPoint, one sees a terrific record if you're an investor. The stock price has gone up. They've been very well managed, and in many regards better managed than the nonprofit insurance companies. But part of that good management, the appearance of good management, has been the reduction of the amount of monies taken in as premiums paid back to the community.
Maryland House Speaker Casper Taylor says Schramm's study will shape the debate over the conversion of CareFirst. But CareFirst disputes Schramm's figures, and some commentators contend that treating CareFirst as insurer of last resort is a vestige of a bygone era, an era before the growth of private health insurance and the advent of government programs for the elderly and poor. Schramm disagrees.
Well, first of all, Medicaid is not the insurer of last resort. You have to qualify. It's a means-tested program. And Medicaid provides insurance largely to people on social welfare. It's means-tested. Poor people get Medicaid under the schema of federal and state law. The insurer of last resort is for people who may not be poor but who cannot get coverage in the private for-profit marketplace.
Schramm sees conversion as a solution in search of a problem. There is no clamor for it from consumers, no evidence supporting it in disinterested academic research. He says it's another Wall Street fashion.
We watched a fashion that only a year ago this week had people in Wall Street believing that a new way to handle oil and gas commodities existed, that Enron had the key to it, and that was the future. And that other power companies that didn't know how to play in the futures market and treat energy as commodities would somehow fail and not be around. Well, a year later, guess who's not around? Enron. And guess, there are tens of thousands of disappointed investors who actually invested in a fashion statement, if you will. They invested in an intellectual vogue, if you will, an idea. And I think that there's an equal risk in the insurance business.
Maryland's insurance commissioner is going to hold hearings on the proposed conversion of CareFirst, along with the state attorney general, Joe Curran.
Well, actually, from our office, although we specifically are required to look at the disposition of charitable trusts, at the same time, the Office of the Attorney General certainly could say, well, is this in the best interest of the public? In other words, do the citizens of Maryland benefit by this transaction? And if so, how so? That really is part of what the insurance commissioner will be looking at, although he has to look at it from a standpoint, is this not in the interest of the public? I'd like to reverse that and say, well, is it really good for Maryland citizens, D.C. citizens, Delaware citizens?
As for Carl Schramm, he thinks he already knows where the public interest lies.
We are watching the conversion of a quasi-public entity with a noble and glorious history of being formed to be a charitable organization, to operate in the charitable sector, to successfully have operated for 70 years as a charitable entity, to have done nothing but great service to this state, suddenly becoming the object of a large-scale investor-driven game to convert these public assets and quasi-public assets into investor-owned assets.
The question, says Carl Schramm, is just who CareFirst cares for. I came here for some answers, but CareFirst declined to be interviewed for this report. I'm Mark Cohen, and this has been Coffee House Forum.
Look, we're all aware that the electric utility companies are one of the nation's last monopolies. We're all aware of that, right? So why is that?
The present system has kept us in good stead for the last 100 years. We'd like to keep things as they have been. Trust us.
At a time when I can send a fax from an airplane, electric utilities still believe in guys jumping over backyard fences to read a meter. Why?
Hi, and welcome to a second look at the Coffee House. Other generations had their H.L. Mencken, their I.F. Stone. Well, actually, tell the truth, I'm old enough to remember them both. But today, we have our own truth-sayer, our own soothsayer, our own irritant to the conscience, a journalist who tells us the uncomfortable facts of life. Let me introduce you to Sam Smith, editor of the Progressive Review, a periodical also known as Washington's most unofficial source. Sam, welcome to the Coffee House.
Evening.
Okay, you've written another book, another commentary on our times, on our woe-begone society. It's called Why Bother? Now, is that meant to be cynical or just provocative?
Well, it's a central question, isn't it?
Yes.
It does get a great reaction. It gets a great reaction when people ask you, well, what's the name of your book? And you tell them, they all laugh.
It's a name people can remember.
Because a lot of people have asked that question, especially younger people.
I'm not younger.
And what I thought I would do would be to try to give people some perspective on why others who have tried things that are very difficult have managed to keep going and what has kept them going and what sort of hazards they've faced. And so it's a fairly tough book, but in the end it's sort of a love story about the individual.
Well, I was going to say the same thing. It's fundamentally optimistic, even though it...
Yeah, well, my agent, I got turned down by 3 agents and 14 editors. And my own agent told me it was too dark and dour. And I said, well, Ann, when I read excerpts to college students, they think it's optimistic. And I began to realize that I was dealing with a generation gap, and I was also dealing with a success gap, because when you talked about struggle and failure to successful editors, they didn't particularly want to hear about it. And,
Too close to home.
Yeah, and John Ralston Saul says that we live in a competitive society, which means that you've got winners and losers. And, of course, you have fewer winners than you have losers. So basically, if you have a competitive society, you have a society of losers. And that's what we have, set out as our standard. I don't think it's a particularly healthy one. But it does mean there are a lot of people who are trying to do good things that are having a very hard time doing it, and they don't get much support.
And you're their voice in this.
Well, I'm just trying to. I grew up in the last great era when everything was perfect, the 1950s. The 1990s and the 1950s, have a great deal of similarities. In that, if you didn't think that things were perfect, then there was relatively few places to go. I came to realize that, though in the 1950s we actually had better support than in the 1990s if you were a young person, because we had the Beats, we had existentialism, we had the civil rights movement, we had cool jazz. There were a lot of ways that you could express your alienation from the culture.
Right. Well, alienation, I think that's the touchstone for you.
Yeah, I wish I hadn't said that word, because I don't believe in it, and I'll tell you why I don't believe in it. Is that, why should we define ourselves by our feeling towards the commercial or the corrupt political culture? Why do we define ourselves as being alienated from something that we don't want to have anything to do with? You see, that's
well, okay. Well, let me pick a different word, because let me say independent.
Right.
I've written some books, and people have said some nice things about them, but let me tell the audience what people say about you and your books. One person says that you have a big old cussed independent streak, and somebody else says that your book is a kick in the pants, and your own publisher says that you've been repeatedly out of touch with your time and culture. So I have to say, no one's ever said such grand compliments about me. I mean, obviously you take some pride in being an independent.
Well, I don't try to. I mean, I just do my thing, and it's like people used to say to Harry Truman, "Give them hell, Harry," and he'd say, "I don't give them hell. I just tell them the truth, and they think it's hell." I try to convince people that basically I'm just a premature moderate. I'm a moderate of a time that hasn't come yet. And during the Spanish Civil War, the people who fought in the Spanish Civil War from this country were identified by the FBI as premature anti-fascists.
Premature.
So I sort of consider myself a premature moderate.
That's sort of we had a policy like that in Vietnam, didn't we? Preventive destruction of villages. You say at one point in the book that Richard Nixon was the last liberal president.
Oh yeah, I throw it. That doesn't
another provocation.
Yeah. That's just sort of a random provocation. The book is actually about the individual, but I can't get too far away from politics. But I think it is important that people understand that there are big waves and small waves in politics, and the last real bout of liberal programs, domestic programs, came under that awful man, Richard Nixon. I mean, that's just a fact. It's not a fact that I would particularly like to have be true, but it is.
He promoted
the EPA, I think one of the national endowments, he even called for a negative income tax, which was opposed, ironically, by, among other people, the National Welfare Rights Organization, because it wasn't big enough. And just imagine of how different our politics would be if we had gotten a negative income tax instead of the whole welfare program that we ended up with.
Well, I remember during Clinton's attempt at health care reform that compared to what Clinton was proposing, Nixon had done them 3 or 4 times better, although it didn't pass,
But
obviously.
you see, I think that reflects the fact that politicians don't do anything. They're just gatekeepers. And if you're in a progressive time, then you get progressive politicians. You get the Republicans are going to be more conservative, but they're still going to be better than what you get in a very right-wing time, such as we've had since Ronald Reagan. Which you've had a steady decline in our civil liberties, regardless of whether a Democrat or a Republican has been in office.
That the Democrats haven't held up their end of the bargain. They've
right.
let things drift.
I mean, we find somebody like Clinton who never met a civil liberties they really liked. I mean, he had sort of the mentality of a Southern sheriff, and so he was sort of like the warm-up band for George W. Bush, so that when something like September 11th happens, and everybody's psychologically prepared for the sort of, for a life that, as who was it, Montgomery Bart in The Simpsons says that oppression and loss of liberty is just something you have to put up with if you want to live in the land of the free.
Well, well, it's true, I guess, that things have been good. We've settled. I have to admit, I've settled into a mainstream, middle-class, middle-aged life to some extent. And you say it at a point, pointing the finger at people like me, I think, that someone has been careless, cruel, greedy, stupid, but it wasn't us, was it? We were just watching.
Well, that was from the introduction, in which I'm using the metaphor of the television set. It sort of describe how Americans go through their social life in terms of watching television. It's an event, it's a spectacle, and it's not our fault. I mean, we remove ourselves from responsibility, and a lot of what I talk about in this book is responsibility of the sort of existential sort, and existentialism is sort of the philosophy that nobody can take your shower for you, and also by extension, nobody can run your government for you if you don't take any interest.
And that's what we've been doing. As you point out over and over again, we've been watching, not taking responsibility for the last 20, 30 years.
That's right, and it's affected us in lots of different ways. We have, for example, we have tended to, instead of being ideologically involved in politics, we tend to treat it like as though politics were a brand. And so our politics become more of a cultural descriptor than they are a real political one. If you, instead of liberals, seeking to that huddled masses can breathe free, they're boomers seeking an SUV. And so you have this sort of thing where, as long as you're identified as a liberal or as conservative, you're safe, and it doesn't really make that much difference what the policies are, as long as you sort of obey a few basic icons that are held to identify, those positions.
Right, and get your SUV on the side. Well, you weren't always a populist. I take it you
I think I was a populist.
Were you?
Yeah, I wrote a piece about neo-populism in 1964. And I got so upset because then somebody wrote about George Wallace being a populist, and I said, wait a second. So I sort of went undercover for a while because the mass media had sort of identified populism as a bad thing. But I think I've always been a populist, and I think that...
nonetheless, you started out at Harvard. Was that... I mean, when you were in high school, you wanted to go to Harvard?
Well, I didn't. I went to Harvard because my brother was there, and I went up there on a Saturday night, and they were having a party, and it was so much fun, and it didn't occur to me that all over America people in colleges were doing the same thing. I thought it was something. So I went there, and I graduated magna cum probation, and Harvard and I had a somewhat tenuous relationship with each other.
So you were, so Harvard didn't change.
I am enjoying mightily Cornel West and Henry Gates taking on the administration of Harvard at the present time.
Well, I read recently that Harvard pays its professors about 7 times more than its janitors, which is apparently the biggest gap between janitors and professors of any university on the East Coast.
Yeah, and that was apparent in those days too. I was news director of the college radio station, and I ended up assigning myself to cover the Cambridge City Council, which gave me a little taste of the conflict between a city and a university town and the university itself. And A lot of times I sort of went with the bad guys down in City Hall.
You haven't lost any of that spunk, I take it.
Oh yeah,
really
I have.
don't-
And what's
no,
scary
well,
about it is, I mean, yeah, I've lost it. But here's what's scary is I'm more a pariah now at 64 than I was at 24. Now that's given all the deterioration that has occurred, and the only reason I'm still going is because of the internet. That technology has improved at the same speed that I've deteriorated.
I read just the other day on the internet, you said that we owe an apology to the people of Afghanistan. I take it you think we overreacted?
Well, I think we owe an apology to them for bombing the bejesus out of them, looking for bin Laden when he turned out not to be there. I mean, it's sort of it's like the police going in and wrecking a whole block of houses because they think a rapist is in one of them.
Right.
It's not a particularly good law enforcement technique.
But it's and the rest of the country hasn't caught on. Well, I mean, they're oblivious. We're watching.
One of the problems, and I don't blame people for this, because if your choice is the television product, 75% of the people get most of their news from television, which is controlled by a very few corporations, some of which, like NBC, are owned by defense contractors. If you only have, in what is clearly a religious war, if you only have military experts and you don't even ask a priest or a Muslim or a rabbi on, to discuss it, it's a little strange.
Well, luckily we have the Coffee House, which isn't as good as the Progressive Review, but it'll do for now. But thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Thanks to Sam Smith for being with us, and thanks to Sam for being a cussed, uncompromising, and plain-spoken wise man. Every generation needs one. I'm Howard Cohen, and this has been A Second Look.
This is Glen Echo. It's wonderful. I was here 4 years ago, and it was not like it is tonight. This is the first salsa dance that I've been to. It's a huge space. There's lots of people, all in a good mood, all steaming hot, and all having a good time.
Glen Echo Park, here in Glen Echo, Maryland, was once a popular amusement park. It closed in 1968, but was reopened by the National Park Service several years later. Glen Echo's long tradition of dance began in 1899. Dances were first held in open-air pavilions, and then later in the elegant Crystal Ballroom, the site of today's Spanish Ballroom. Every weekend night and Sunday afternoons, the park's Spanish Ballroom is filled with dancers who come to kick up their heels to the sound of DC area's most popular dance bands. Each session begins with a dance lesson. Then the band comes on and the dancing begins.
Friday nights and Sunday nights are contra dancing, a style of country dancing similar to the square dance. Saturday nights are our most popular dances, and those are primarily swing. We do strive for variety, however, so we also, as you are going to see today, have salsa dancing on occasion.
It's a fabulous place. People are nice, everybody's friendly, no smoking, it's fabulous. No drinking. Have a blast, and everybody's laughing.
The ballroom has a very, very unique history. It was built in 1933 on the site of an older ballroom, and it became the big band dance hall for the Washington, D.C. area. People like Tommy and Jimmy Dorsey played here. Most of the big bands of the 30s and 40s found their way out to Glen Echo for an evening or a week. In the 1950s, a local television show was shot here, the Milt Grant Show, precursor of American Bandstand. This ballroom has a long history of being on the cutting edge of dance.
And the building has a beautiful springboard floor, which is good for the joints. I'm 61 years old, but I can dance for 4 hours non-stop.
It's a lot of fun, great music, and just the best dance floor in Washington by far. Once you've danced on it, it's hard to dance other places just because of the way the floor is made, and the size really is probably the greatest thing, is that it can hold so many dancers. Dancers of all ages and all levels can dance here and have a really good time and a really good experience, and that's just unique to Glen Echo.
For the Weekend Traveler, I'm Cathy Kristiansen.
Hi, and welcome to In Step at the Coffee House. There are few leaders in the arts world today with the vision, stamina, and talent that my guest possesses. Carla Perlo is a performer, teacher, choreographer, and community leader. She's the executive director of the Dance Place, an extraordinary institution bringing world-class dance to our region. I'm delighted to have her with us today to discuss how she does all of this and more. Welcome to the Coffee House.
Thanks for inviting me here,
I'm
Liz.
so glad you're here, Carla. You know, I think people have some interesting ideas about dance. They come to the theater, they see these beautiful people moving, these gorgeous dances, and I'm not sure they understand just how much work goes into us. Just tell us a little bit about the Dance Place and what you've made happen there.
Yeah, well, the Dance Place was first located in Adams Morgan, and we were there for 5 years, and I got a phone call that said, Carla, the rent has quadrupled, and so now you can spend $6,000 a month cash if you'd like to stay here, or you have 30 days to move out and find another theater. Well, most people know how difficult it is to find a new apartment, but most people don't know how difficult it is to find a theater, to find a space that's large enough, that's wide enough, that's particularly high enough, that's deep enough without pillars. And we were very fortunate to find our space, 3225 8th Street, just a block and a half from the Red Line Metro stop in Brookland, and a very nice neighborhood that's quite diverse. And we've been there for 16 years.
But Carla, I saw that place when you saw it, and you saw something beyond anybody could have dreamed.
Well, the minute I walked in there was this amazing light that was coming in through the windows, and I knew that I had arrived and the space was correct for us. And there was a little red truck parked all the way in the back of the space, and I thought if the truck looked that small, the space must be big enough. Of course, when we got there, people complained that it really wasn't quite wide enough because we don't have any wing space. But it's worked very beautifully as both a studio and a theater. And over the 16 years that we've developed it, it has become a hub of dance in Washington, D.C., as quoted by Alan Kriegsman of the Washington Post.
So you just said something that, you know, it's a theater and a school. Let's talk about the theater for a minute.
Okay.
I know you bring a lot of work to Washington. Can we take a look at one of the tapes that we have to see what's there? And you can tell us about it as we watch, okay? So, you do a lot with bringing people here.
Yeah, the work that we're going to be seeing now is actually the director of Howard University's theater department and dance department there. Not the theater department, the dance department, Dr. Sherelle Berryman Miller. And she has a group called Images of Cultural Artistry. She's both on our teaching staff as well as we feature her every other year in a full performance of her work.
So she's from Washington, but you don't just do Washington artists.
No, we pride ourselves in supporting the growth of artists that are from this region, but also we are hosting artists from across the country, mostly New York, San Francisco, and also some international artists as well. And I say mostly from New York and San Francisco because those are really magnet cities where there's a dense population of dancers. And Washington's wonderful, and we're very proud, as you know, that a lot of important international artists as yourself have decided to make Washington your home, and enabling us to really become a center here in Washington and attract a tremendous amount of artists to make their homes here. And I admire you and your work in being a pioneer and being part of that process of saying, you know, we're going to make our homes here.
And of course, we all need to be seeing the work that's being made out there in the world, and that's one of the things that happens at Dance Place, but that's not the only thing. Then you have the school. Who comes to the school and what kinds of programs do you have going on?
Yeah, most of the time when people hear the word school, they think it's just our program for children, but actually the school teaches people of all ages, of all sizes, of all colors, and primarily it's modern dance and also African dance. Although there are some other types of dance that we teach, that's our main thrust. And when I say modern dance, we're talking about someone who walks in right off the street who's never danced before but wants to have dance as their means of expression, of their means of health, and for some people their means of spirituality. And then we also have a very rigorous program where we train professionals. And as you know, the professionals, we never stop studying. So we're in class together, always aspiring to do that turn a little bit better, or that balance just a little bit better than we did the year before.
We know that, but I think a lot of people don't understand that dance is one of the fields in which people study forever. The most professional people continue to take class and take class.
I think that most professionals, whether you're in law or you're in medicine or you're in business, you're always studying. But you don't study in groups the way that we do. We study in the studio. You have to go to the studio because it is done in groups. That's how we study. And that's when you do your best. You dance better in the studio when you're surrounded by your peers and the live music and the teacher that guides you than you can at home in your study with your book. It just doesn't work that way for us.
Right.
So we have an active group of professional people who come into the studio daily to take class and to rehearse. And then in the evenings on Saturday are the avocational dancers or some young aspiring dancers who want to climb that ladder up and be professionals. And then after school, we have a very rigorous program of dance called Kids on the Move. And that's ballet, tap, jazz, creative movement, moms and fathers and children together. So the whole potpourri of dance experiences and movement experiences for the young people. And we actually have a tape of one of our junior companies, the Step Team. Maybe we can take a look at that.
Good. Great.
And here you see the Step Team. They started in the summer under the direction of Kirsten Smith, who's with Dance Africa, and they've developed into their own performing company. In fact, they were nominated for a Metro Dance Award last year. They didn't have a category for youth, and the person that nominated them said, they didn't nominate them because it was a youth company. They nominated them because they were great. And they're just terrific. They've been performing all over town now. And we're really proud of them. And they are part of our Energizer program, which is an after-school program that is about life skills. Helping young people, how do they find the right steps in life to become a responsible adult?
This is probably the part, again, it's good to remind people that although many of us want to be professional dancers, what dance does for people in their everyday life, from organizing to thinking, is really spectacular. So it's great to see the kids working that way.
Absolutely, and I think that most people who achieve in life say, you know, what I did in front of the public whether it was in public speaking or as a musician, as a young musician, or having a part in a theater production or being in a dance, gave me the confidence, gave me the ability to stand up and speak out and to be heard and to work as part of a group and to realize that I am part of a fabric. It's not all about me. It's about the fabric. It's about the society we live in. And I think it's extremely powerful for these children in terms of their own self-esteem, their own sense of who they are, and that they can make a difference.
The thing is, Carl, this is what's so great. It's true what you just said, that it's this much larger fabric. But the fact is, art often starts with the person, as yours did. So we've got the theater and this great work you bring, we've got the school, and then there's also the work that you yourself make as a choreographer. Talk about that.
Okay. One of the things I encourage the young people to do, and I know you do this with your company as well, is to say to people, if you have an idea, work on the idea. Be brave enough to be creative, and then have a voice. And share your thoughts with other people in whatever genre you happen to use. You and I happen to have chosen dance. I studied with a woman named Thelma Hill. I often
one of the
say
great ones.
A great inspirational teacher. Had she been a mathematician, it would have been the math place. It would not have been the dance place. But she was the light of my career and showed me the way. And when I asked her, I said, do you think I have the talent to become a dancer? She said, you're the only one that can answer that question. You must answer that for yourself. And often we're looking for that outside praise. Yes, you can do it. Yes, you'll be successful. Yes, you'll make it. And of course, you and I both know that is a daily discovery. And I've been extremely fortunate to gather around me professional dancers who have their own voices, who have their own companies, but we choose to come together to create works. And most of my work is based around humanitarian themes.
Well, let's look at this last tape then, and you tell us a little bit about what it is and what the theme of this particular dance is.
Okay. This is the last section of a piece called Living in Color Instead of Black and White. And I'm really concerned that in our society we're still very, very much divided. The piece starts with adults dancing, the black side and the white side, and you can see the stripe down the middle of the stage. The black people are on one side and the white people are on the other side. And the children come in with these colored balls, because I think the children are the people that enlighten us and bring color into the world and say, you know, if I have a ball and I roll that ball, that kid does not care what color I am. They just want to play with me. They want the focus, they want the attention. And then the piece evolves into this, where you have a lot of color come in, and here the boys, they come back again. And I feel that they are the ones that can remove the racism that we suffer from today. So they're taking up the line that divides people.
Great. So Carla, it's an extraordinary amount of work that you do to sustain all this, I know. And I want to understand, why ultimately does it matter? Why should anybody watching care about this? Why would people trek down to Brooklyn? Why would people care about contemporary art in America today? What's the deal?
You know, I think when we see what happened with September 11th, so much misunderstanding. You know, we've come so far and we haven't come anywhere at all. It's still about the same thing. It's the haves and the have-nots. It's you're different than I am. It's you're dark and I'm light, or vice versa. And so I really believe in the arts as a way of leveling the playing field, where people can visit each other's cultures in a way that is not threatening. When I see diverse audiences applauding for all those African American children, I feel we have broken through racism. Whether the piece is about racism or not, I think that all art enlightens us and helps us understand each other better. And really that's the essence of why I do what I'm doing, to help people realize their own voice and their own creativity. Because once you have people that say, I can be creative, I have ideas, and I'm going to have a more creative life, and I'm going to be able to express myself. Then you begin to elevate people.
And of course, you've built this incredible institution for people in Washington to partake, either by coming down and taking a class, or as you suggest, by coming to the theater and visiting something a little different from themselves. Thank you. I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy life to spend it with us. I encourage everyone to make a trip to Brookland in the District of Columbia and to see the dance place. Look what's happening in the contemporary dance and performance scene. I'm Liz Lerman, and this has been In Step.
No, I don't smoke. Secondhand gives me a breath of that cancer stick. No, I don't smoke. Red wine makes me want to have a light. Boy next door asks, are you using that ashtray? Shake my head, no. He's unpacking some special kind of stick. Box is green, that means healthy, natural, plus ponytail crunchy. I breathe in. Think about bumming one. Don't want to start smoking, but music's giving me that took, like it's nighttime, but it ain't. It's daytime, snow daytime, cabin fever gone from my veins, now just Keeman tea, and it's time for lunch at Tryst. My knees knock the side table between, like my lover's place, wedged and waiting. Breathe it in from him, from her. It's all good, my compañera says. Don't sweat it, just one won't hurt.
Hello, and welcome to Rewind at the Coffee House, where we're going to talk about filmmaking that tells America's stories. Today I have as my guests two filmmakers who've been making documentaries together for the last 20 years. You might have seen their work on public TV. They made Louisiana Boys. It's about Delta politics and its peculiarities. They made Moms, about the many ways of American motherhood. They made American Tongues, about the many ways we speak English in this country. And Vote for Me, about local elections and the passions that fuel them, among many other films. You can see that they're interested in people, in politics, and in American culture. Let's call them visual anthropologists of this democratic society. Thank you for joining me today, Louis Alvarez and Andy Kolker. Louis and Andy, you're here having done it again. You've made another film about class in America, people like us, and class in terms of lower class, middle class, upper class. Now, everybody knows we're all middle class. Why did you make a movie on this subject?
Yeah, that's the story that America likes to tell itself. And of course, the middle class in America is huge, but there are other classes as well. We were interested in social class, I think, partly because many of our other films had dealt with it, but kind of edged around it. In our film, American Tongues, which is all about the way people speak, a lot of that has to do with who you are and where you fit on the social spectrum, and therefore what you think about each other's speech. Well, we kind of said, well, you know, there hasn't been any film that has explicitly dealt with this subject before. And in our tradition of delving where no documentary filmmakers have dared go before, we decided to take this one on. And it was, in fact, a huge challenge because Americans, by and large, don't want to talk about their social status. They don't want to recognize where they are because, you know, most people don't see it as any plus at all to talk about this.
Well, let's take a look at a short clip from the film about lawn ornaments.
Ornamental concrete. People come in and they want to dress up their yard. Blue-collar people like these little colorful things stuck in between their shrubs. It's nice to have something to dress it up, just a little touch here or a little touch there, but don't overdo it. That cheapens everything. I can tell you this, it's their yard. If they want to put a giraffe in it, I sell skunks. They want to put a skunk in it. That's entirely up to them. That's why this is America.
So, Louis, tell me, was it difficult to get people to talk on this subject that people don't really think that there's a plus in talking about?
In fact, it was. We probably had a harder time getting people to talk about class than about any other topic we've done a film on. The only people who didn't give us any problem at all were the people who were absolutely the lowest social status, people living in trailers, barely off welfare. They felt they had nothing to lose and they wanted to tell their story. But most people, especially upper middle class people, got very nervous. Because in this country, one of the worst things that can be said about you is, oh, you think you're better than everybody else. And somebody who self-identifies as upper middle class thinks that, oh, gee, that means I'm saying I'm better than somebody else. I'm better than just the regular middle class people. And that would be bad because I would either be a snob or I would be aloof, and people didn't want it. So we did it, but it took years. I mean, we found a genuine blue blood who told us tales out of school. You know, that was very hard to find, but we did find him. We found some...
And I understand he didn't like it.
Well, initially he said some somewhat harsh things about we walk better, we stand better, we look better, we're better educated, we have better manners than everybody else, and we know it. That's the way he felt. He, in fact, straddles both worlds because he's a musician and a writer. He has to work for a living like everybody else. But he has a certain kind of an attitude, which is, we believe, the true old blue blood way of thinking. So he was true to his class in that sense. And it was important to have that, for Americans to know that there are people like that still around. They're not out of a picture book somewhere.
Well, Andy, what was the most shocking thing for you when you did these interviews and you did the research? Out of that process, what surprised you?
I think the thing that kept surprising me over and over again was the fact that America is a very segregated place, and it's not only segregated by race, it's also segregated by class. And that fact kept hitting us again and again because people, and just like the title of the program says, people, you hang around with people like yourself, and you very rarely have contact with people who are not of your social group in any kind of a way where you look at them as equals. Okay, so upper middle class people might have servants of one sort or another, people who fix their lawns, people who clean their houses and all that sort, but it's a very unequal relationship. There are not very many places in America where people of different classes meet each other. And when they do, there's very often friction.
Did you capture any of that friction, Louis, as you were looking for sites to film?
Well, one of the hard things about it, as Andy said, it was actually very hard to come up with locations where there would be more than one class. Not people walking down the street together on the way to a bus or something like that, but places where people were actually interacting. But we did find one place, and it was a bar in Baltimore, on the east side of Baltimore, which is a blue-collar, heavily blue-collar neighborhood. We found a group of upper middle-class kids, mostly from the suburbs, who like to go what they call dive bar crawling, where they go to little corner bars, of which Baltimore has many, and they buy everybody, they barge into a strange bar, they buy everybody drinks, and they feel like they're kind of getting down, and they really feel like they're getting in touch with somehow a more authentic kind of person, the blue-collar person who doesn't worry about a lot of things that upper middle-class people worry about. it's a very uncomfortable scene for a lot of people to watch, but it does show Americans interacting, but it's a very strange kind of, there's some resistance on the part of the blue-collar people, but some people like the attention. We think it's very complicated, and we think it really kind of shows up the way class really isn't addressed in America and how it is kind of an edgy subject.
I mean, they think, for the most part, those kids think that they're celebrating that culture, and a culture in Baltimore which largely has faded. Viewers can look at it either as a celebration or as condescension. And I think you can in fact see equal doses of both of that. And that's what happens very often when classes do actually mix.
Well, you've talked about one myth, which is the middle class thinks that the working class is more free and doesn't have as many troubles, lives for today, and so on. What are myths that you might have uncovered about people's understanding of upper class or upper middle class?
Well, the blue bloods, for the most part, live their own lives, and they live their own lives separate, for the most part, from other classes, and that's kind of what it is. On the other hand, they also have their own rituals. They also have their own inclusiveness and exclusiveness, and they have very, very well-developed antennae, very much like Edith Wharton or Henry James, that they have a very, very healthy dose of the ability to discern among classes, among people within their own class, as well as people outside of their own class.
One of the most interesting things we found was that for blue-collar kids, going into a white-collar, upper-middle-class world, which maybe they did when they went to high school, maybe they got really good grades and they got to go to like a magnet school where they came into contact for the first time with kids who came from an upper-middle-class background, is that for a lot of blue-collar kids, it was a real crisis of confidence. There was a real sense that they weren't entitled, and a lot of these upper-middle-class kids were. There was sometimes a sense that in their own communities, they'd be deserting their real background. Of working class, hardworking people by going off with people whose parents, for example, didn't do manual labor for a living, but might have done intellectual labor. There's a real kind of a conflict, and a lot of upper middle class people aren't aware of that conflict. The burden is all on the blue collar kids to kind of become middle class. It doesn't work the other way in this country.
So when you have that relationship, the upper middle class person is going to be oblivious to the fact that the lower middle class person is feeling uncomfortable.
Yes, and in fact, I found making this film, talking about it to friends of mine, a number of friends of mine came from lower middle class, working class homes. I had never known that because I'd met them in college. I assumed we were all the same. Turns out, oh no. And watching the film brought back all sorts of experiences for them.
Of course, that's the way privilege works. It's invisible. And unless someone points out the fact, and usually someone of a different class points out to you that, yes, you, Mr. Upper Middle Class or upper class person, you in fact are acting in a way which assumes your superiority, assumes that you're better, than the people who are not your betters, then, they're not going to know. And people can live in these little bubbles, the bubbles of the people like us bubbles, for their whole lives.
Well, so what you found out are not only these class divisions exist, but some ways that people perpetuate those divisions, both by accepting them and deciding that they don't have the right to leave them, and also by not knowing other people around them.
The real problem is we don't know each other. I think we try not to have any villains in this particular film because I think everybody's in the same boat. Everybody is in their own little world with people like themselves, and it's hard to really break away from that. Some people have to break away from it because in order to make money or to get ahead in the world, but it's a real struggle, and I don't think we talk about that in this country because of this belief that, we're really all kind of middle class, we're just all Americans together.
And it's funny because we ultimately, we know how to talk about race. We've had many years, we've had decades of learning the vocabulary of political correctness when we talk about race. We don't know how to do that with class. We don't have the vocabulary particularly. If you go to England or France, they're perfectly happy to talk about class because it's a part of their national pastime practically, talking about one thing or another relating to class and defining themselves as a member of a particular class. We just don't do that.
We don't have too much time left, so I'd like to talk about your website because it's an interesting thing to see filmmakers who are veteran filmmakers make a website part of the show. You'd go to pbs.org and then / and then you write in people like us without any.
One word, right?
One word, people like us. So tell us about designing the website, Louis.
Well, for us, the web, which is a way a lot of people get their information these days, it's an extension of what we're trying to do with our films. We want to reach as many people as possible and get them to think about our ideas. So for
but your website has games on it.
Right,
I mean,
well,
it's not an information. It's not like going to class.
Well, in the same way, when you watch our movies, it's not like it's not your father's documentary. It's you have a lot of fun watching our films. You go to our website. There's a lot of fun. We have a game we come up with called Chintz or Shag, where you get a little living room to furnish, and depending on how you furnish it, what you choose for the chairs and what size the TV is and all that, will tell you what class you are. And it's kind of fun, especially if you get slotted in a class which you don't think you are. Then there's plenty of places to go on the website to find out how did we arrive at that, what does it mean, what are other people's reactions.
Great.
It's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Andy and Louie. And I hope that you'll find people like us on your television soon, or on your computer at pbs.org/peoplelikeus. I'm Pat Afterheady, and this has been Rewind. Good luck and good viewing.
If you look at the parking lots, the student parking lot is a lot nicer than the faculty lot. It's frustrating because I went to school 20 years and they're driving off in a car that cost more than I make a year. That's tough. Yeah, it's hard sometimes to rely on the intrinsic value of what I do to be satisfied when the kid drives off in the Jaguar.
That's it for this time. See you next month in The Coffee House.
I was a liberal arts major in college.
I didn't speak a second language.
What could I?
What could I offer the Peace Corps?
The answer surprised me. I served in South Africa teaching HIV/AIDS awareness.
Working with my students in Nicaragua was a great experience. Redefine your world. Join the Peace Corps.
Apply now at peacecorps.gov.
They came from every corner of the country. From small towns and big cities. But they all shared one thing in common. They belonged to a family called Marines. A tough and determined few, dedicated to protecting everything we hold sacred. And still they come. Celebrate the history of those proud few who have earned the title Marine.
This is me. And my mom and dad. And my big brother, Alex.
and Jack. This is the day I learned that sandals got their name from sand. That jellyfish aren't made of jelly. That stars don't just come from the sky. That the ocean is bigger than all of us. This is the day we all got to forget I was sick. This was my wish.